A new law in the Australian state of New South Wales called the Conversion Practices Ban Act 2024 allows religious expression and prayer as long as it isn't, quote, directed to changing or suppressing an individual's sexual orientation or gender identity. CBN's Billy Hallowell is here to discuss. Billy, what were your initial thoughts to this law?
My initial thoughts were, what in the world is going on? But I think we know what in the world is going on. We're watching prayer sort of be attacked in these really bizarre ways in different countries, right? You're seeing this happen in Europe, with silent prayer in certain areas outside of abortion clinics with these buffer zones, and you've seen people getting arrested. In this case specifically, what's so wild about this particular law, the Conversion Practices Ban Act of 2024, as you stated, is that if you go to the government's website there, they have a whole explainer about this law, and they say that the act does not prohibit prayer. Okay, it says that plainly, but then it says, however, praying with or over a person with the intent to change or suppress their sexual or gender identity is unlawful. So it's almost like 1984, because it's saying, oh, we don't prohibit prayer, but then it says, well, actually we do if you're trying to do these things. And what is so crazy, I want to read one more line for you. It says, it is unlawful even if that person has asked you to pray for them to be able to change or suppress their sexuality or gender identity. So it goes even further to basically say that if that person has come to you and they want help in that area, you cannot pray with them over those things.
I think it's hard for people in the States to contextualize this, because you said it perfectly. It sounds Orwellian, 1984. This could never, you can't arrest someone for praying. But then we see what happened in the UK, and that's exactly what happened. I mean, the fact that people were handcuffed, and it's like, what are you doing? Praying? It's literally hard to believe. But I want to read something from the Anti-Discrimination New South Wales, which is basically the state government body that handles complaints for this law. Here it is, quote, the Conversion Practices Ban Act 2024 does not prohibit prayer. However, praying with or over a person with the intent to change or suppress their sexual or gender identity is unlawful. It is unlawful even if that person has asked you to pray for them to be able to change or suppress their sexual gender or their sexuality or gender identity. So, Billy, what you just said is literally the statement. And it's not like, oh, maybe we misread this. Like, no, if you do exactly what you just said, that is part of, I can't believe these words, breaking the law. So what should we, outsiders who don't live in Australia do with this?
Okay, first of all, you got to be praying. You got to be praying for people living in Australia
while
in
it's
this
still
state.
legal.
While it's still legal.
Maybe that's too soon.
You've got to be praying, and you've got to be pushing back. I think one of the big things that happens a lot of times when it comes to these sorts of things, and I'm assuming there will be people in Australia, and we need to dig more into this, who will be challenging this law. Obviously, they have a different legal system than we do and how that works, right? If there's a law in a state here in America, it can be challenged. You have the Supreme Court. You can go all the way up to the Supreme Court if you need to. And so obviously, my hope is that we pray for those people. We also encourage them. And having these conversations are really important, because if you don't do anything, if there's no pressure put on them, if we don't talk about it, this is the first step. When it comes to persecution, something like this, it never stops here, right? It becomes something bigger. And in the same explainer that you just mentioned, they go on to say what is not a conversion practice. And they have a whole list of things. It is not a conversion practice to do any of the following, providing, and they literally put this in bold, providing there is no intention to change or suppress an individual's sexual orientation or gender identity. They talk about a religious leader preaching to or praying for their congregation, a religious leader praying for or providing pastoral care for an individual. So I'll stop there, because there are other reasonings that...
There's literally an earthquake happening.
I just heard that. I was like, what does that sound?
Do we keep this in the video? Like, that's insane. There's literally an earthquake. God is not happy with Australia.
You need to Australia. You need to listen, because
earthquake detected.
Wow.
I am not making this up. This is giving me goosebumps. We're talking about the silencing of prayer. Whoa. We have to keep this in the video. We can't edit this
wild.
out.
That is wild.
That is wild.
As I was pausing, I was like, I'm going to pause there. Whoa. And then I heard the rumbling.
The
Wow.
whole house just shook.
I could hear it from this end. Wow.
Wow. Okay. Well,
Well,
Australia, maybe
Australia, listen up.
reconsider.
I love that God helped us out. It was,
Yeah.
like
Whoa, that is
man.
wild.
I mean, how do you provide pastoral care as a pastor if you have to operate under these auspices of don't address these big issues of orientation and gender identity? If somebody's struggling and they want relief, you're not allowed to help them. So you actually can't serve them in any sort of pastoral care capacity.
Dude, I'm having a hard time circling back because this is just such a crazy experience. Like the ground's still kind of vibrating. I maybe God will not be mocked is a good Bible verse to start with. But no, I think you've given a lot of clarity, Billy. And I think what's important to realize is maybe us in the States, this does seem like, okay, that could never you could never be arrested for praying, but people are in the UK, and I'm sure this will be enforced in Australia. So everything you're talking about, Billy, is exactly what we need to do. Obviously, keep it here on CBN News, because stories like these that just kind of are swept under the rug in most places, we want to expose, because I think, to your point, it's the first step. It's the first step to criminalizing, to outlawing, and people might think this is hyperbolic. I don't think it is. I think it's the getting under the door, undoing the lock to eventual persecution, because it doesn't jive with the worldview of a certain government, which I think is important what we're doing here. So, Billy Hallowell, thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you.